All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. Healthy eating with chronic kidney disease is what we will be presenting today. And just to let you know a little bit about our format, it's a short presentation followed by, we hope, an interactive discussion. So at the end, you'll have a chance to ask questions. You can type the questions in the question section. Hopefully you're able to see that, how you're logged in. It's on the webinar toolbar. And we hope, please let us know any questions you have because we would love this to be an interactive discussion webinar. Okay, and then we have some disclaimers. We know that the information you're about to hear may motivate you to make lifestyle changes, but we tell you to please consult your physician before making any changes to your current routine. And then our presenter, the Cecilia Health Registered Dietitian, will provide strategies to help manage the chronic kidney disease today. And the online Q&A session is intended to give general advice. It is not a substitute for personal medical advice, and it involves the professional opinion of the Cecilia Health Registered Dietitian. All right, and our dietitian today is Lori Olive, and she is our presenter today. She's a registered dietitian as well as a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She is one of our health coaches here at Cecilia Health, where she primarily works with customers from Minnesota and also New York. And she's been working in diabetes education since the mid-90s and joins us today from San Antonio, Texas. So here she is, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Ashley. As Ashley said, I am a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. So I am happy to have you all here. I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to be here. So I hope this proves to be an educational experience for you. If you do have any trouble viewing the slides on your phone or on your monitor, or if you have any audio trouble, please send us a chat through the chat option that you have on your screen, and we'll see what we can do. We'll do our best. So let's start with kind of our agenda for this evening. We're going to talk about how the foods that we eat impact our chronic kidney disease. We're going to talk about specifics with stages 1 and 2, guidelines that are out there, and then we'll also look at guidelines for more developed kidney disease, stages 3, 4, and 5. Those of you who may not be on dialysis will be able to address that. We'll talk a little bit about supplements that your doctor may have asked you to start on. And then we're going to talk about the different minerals, the phosphorus, potassium, sodium, protein, and water balance or water intake or fluid intake. It's not just water, but some of you may have some guidelines that you've been given, some restrictions, things like that. So just please keep in mind that we're not able to provide specific information as far as what is appropriate for you, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. So this is intended to provide general guidelines, but for specifics, you will want to speak with your doctor or meet with your doctor, with a dietitian maybe that works for your doctor that can help you with specifics. So, and then we'll also provide some resources for recipes. Okay, so let's talk about, in general, how does food impact chronic kidney disease? So as we know, I know just making good food choices is good for all of us, but particularly those with chronic kidney disease, because sometimes you may be at a point where you're not you don't have much of an appetite and you're not eating a lot. So it is important that the foods that you are able to eat, that they are high in nutrients, and make sure that you're getting good proteins, because you do want to make sure you've got those nutrients for your energy, just to get through the day. It also does help with preventing infection. Having enough protein is going to help avoid the loss of muscle mass, which is something that certainly people with chronic kidney disease can experience. Again, when you're not eating a lot of calories, that can also affect your weight. So it's important that we're conscious of what we're eating and how much we're eating so that you can maintain a healthy weight. And then ultimately, what we're trying to do is slow down the progression of the kidney disease. So that is going to be a lot of the focus. So guidelines for stages 1 and 2. So basically, when you're in stages 1 and 2, you aren't going to have as many restrictions placed on you. You won't have to be watching things quite as closely, like the sodium and the potassium and the phosphorus, quite as closely. But we do want to still be mindful of what's good for us and good for the slowing of the progression of the kidney disease. Okay. So the other thing we want to look at is a lot of people with chronic kidney disease do also have high blood pressure, and they do also have diabetes. So those are big risk factors when it comes to developing chronic kidney disease, and it is a priority to make sure that your blood sugars are controlled and that your diet is as healthy as possible to keep your blood pressure under control as well. So we'll speak on both of those topics too. Okay, so let's start with staying within stages 1 and 2. One of the things that is of utmost importance is choosing lean sources of protein. So we want to limit the amounts of saturated fat, and in order to do that, it's good to start with choosing lean protein. So whole eggs. Now, we'll talk here in a minute about maybe some limitations on that and how many would be appropriate. But certainly it's a good source of protein. Quinoa is a good source of plant-based protein. So those of you that are trying to follow a plant-based diet are probably familiar with quinoa. Egg whites would be just whole eggs minus the yolk, where the fat and the cholesterol are. Also, fish is a great source of protein. Pork tenderloin, also down below you see beef, the tenderloin. The loins tend to be the leaner parts of the meat. So that's what you want to look for on a label. The skinless chicken or skinless turkey, also very lean. Always best to choose the white meat over the dark meat because it's going to be the leaner cut of meat. And then also soy products, if you enjoy those, like tofu or edamame, tempeh, soy milk, all of those are nice choices of protein as well. So the other thing we want to pay attention to is whole grains because they do provide more fiber than like refined white bread, white rice, etc. It's better to have the brown rice, the whole grain bread. So you want to look for things that say 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain. Basically, if you see the word whole listed as the first ingredient, that's what we're looking for. They may also have the whole grain stamp that you can look for, as it shows here. So those are going to be the better choices, like I said, as opposed to the like white rice and white breads. Also, we want to make sure that we're drinking enough fluids, and fluid does include anything that's liquid at room temperature. That would count as your fluids, and we'll speak to this a little bit more in just a minute. So in general, choose whole grains, drink enough fluids, and then also we want to make sure that we're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables. So you'll want to choose more of the non-starchy vegetables over the starchy ones, and more vegetables are non-starchy as opposed to starchy. The starchy ones would be your peas, your corn, your potatoes. So that would help with your blood sugar control and your glycemic control if that is of concern to you. And then also, you know, the healthier carbs are going to that you find in your vegetables as opposed to sugary things are going to give you energy that you need to get through your day, keep your energy level as high as possible, and then of course just overall again limit your progression of your kidney disease. Okay, so some general guidelines for stages 1 and 2. Um, so in the salt category, we don't have to necessarily avoid salt completely, but we do need to limit it. And this is also true of most Americans, that we do need to limit our sodium intake. And salt is made up of sodium and chloride. It's not 100% sodium. But the amount of sodium that you should be getting per day really does depend on the stage of the kidney disease that you're in, and just the amount of kidney function that you have. So we'll talk about where do we find sodium, how much should we limit sodium, what do we look for on our food labels, things like that. We do want to avoid the salt substitutes, which can be a little bit confusing because it seems like an obvious choice. But things like Nu-Salt or no salt, these are actually made with potassium, and they can actually raise your potassium when that's not something that would be beneficial to us with CKD. So those are things you want to avoid. Mrs. Dash would be a good substitute for those because it's not going to be high in potassium. If you're choosing something that's canned or something that's jarred, it's best to choose something that says no salt added on the package. So like your canned vegetables, a lot of times you can get low sodium or you can get no salt added. So always look for that. You'll want to choose no salt added snacks, unsalted or no salt pretzels. And we will talk about labels here in a minute. You'll want to make sure that you're cooking your meals probably more at home as opposed to eating out, and we will get into that as a little bit more as well. But any kind of processed food, restaurant foods tend to be very high in sodium. Even if they are a low sodium version, a lot of times they can still be high in sodium and not truly be a low sodium food. Okay. It's good to be using fresh herbs and dried herbs and spices to add things to your food as opposed to like commercial dressings and sauces, which tend to be very high in sodium. Also, it's good to drink water, and as opposed to sports drinks or soda, even though those are considered fluid, if you're tracking the amount of fluid that you're getting, they do, however, have the sodas do have phosphorus, the sports drinks do have sodium, they both have sodium, so water is always going to be a better option. When you're eating out, one little tip that we can give you is, you can ask your server to prepare your meal without any added salt, but again, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily low sodium. Something I tell my patients that seems to work for them is, if you're wanting to eat out, to go and pick up your order and bring it home and try to make what would be a really high sodium meal, kind of split that in two and then supplement that meal with a side salad or some vegetables from home, so that then you're basically dividing the sodium from that meal in half because you're supplementing it with some low sodium foods at home. Okay. So also we want to make sure we're avoiding excess sugar. You want to just limit foods with, fructose, high fructose syrup, glucose syrup, honey. These are all different just versions or names for different forms of sugar, like maple syrup, raw sugar, rice sugar, high fructose corn syrup, sorry. So in terms of the diabetes, remember, like I said, a lot of people probably that are listening to this webinar also have diabetes. So our priority really to slow down the progression of the kidney disease is to make sure that your blood sugars are well controlled. And if you have high blood pressure, to also make sure the blood pressure is under control first. Okay. Next, we again want to kind of limit our fat and our cholesterol. Here's where the recommendation says to limit whole eggs to about 2 per week. You can use an egg substitute that you can buy at the grocery store that's just egg whites with some yellow coloring. Or if you wanted to scramble your eggs, you can use like 2 eggs and then just take out the yolk of one of them. And that way you still have, the volume of 2 eggs, and a little bit of the coloring, but not as much as the cholesterol. As far as oils, it's best to use olive oil or canola oil, coconut oil, or sunflower oil. Those are going to be your recommended ones over vegetable oil. And again, limiting saturated fats, which are a lot of your dairies, comes from your dairy foods and your animal fats, and especially just eliminate the trans fats. So we want to limit the saturated and we want to eliminate the trans fats. And that's going to be found in a lot of processed foods and fast foods. Okay. And so then some guidelines more for stages 3 through 5 when you're not on dialysis. We do have some damage already done to the kidneys that's preventing them from working as well. So our kidneys aren't going to filter as well as it usually does. So then you may have some restrictions to some of the nutrients that we've discussed. So maybe your doctor has told you that they want you to limit your potassium or limit your phosphorus. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so for, again, in stages 3, 4, and 5, again, not on dialysis, it's best to limit the amount of protein that you're getting just so that you're reducing the amount of stress on the kidneys because they are not working as well to filter the protein waste. Again, try to get your protein from lean protein sources like your whole eggs, your quinoa, egg whites, your fish, your turkey. You want to limit the amount of beef, bison, lamb, pork, venison, organ meats because of the saturated fat in some of those. So here's some more suggestions of lean proteins, like if you prefer a little bit more plant-based, like 1 ounce of meat is going to be about 7 to 8 grams of protein. Half a cup of beans is about 7 grams of protein, and a large egg is 6 grams of protein. So a piece of meat about the size of the palm of your hand, which I know can vary because everybody's hand is different. Another way to look at it is like the size of a deck of cards is about 3 ounces of meat or about 27 to 30 grams of protein. Okay. So again, talking a little bit about fluid. When your kidneys are to the point where they're not able to filter all the fluid out of your body, you may be told that you need to limit your total intake. And then again, remember that really anything that's liquid at room temperature is going to count as fluid. So any sodas or juices or water or tea, all of that is going to count as your part of your fluid intake. Okay. So then again, sodium, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it does cause your body to retain fluid, which can then cause your blood pressure to rise, which again is just making your kidneys work that much harder. So we want to keep that blood pressure in check. We want to keep the blood sugar in check. all for the purpose of slowing down the progression of the kidney disease. So again, if you have been placed on a sodium restriction or maybe a slight restriction, and this is also, again, what is good for anyone without kidney disease, the amount would be about 2,300 milligrams or less per day, which is the equivalent of about a teaspoon of salt. But most of the time, we're not gonna be just using 1 teaspoon of salt to put over something. So we're going to have to look at labels in order to determine what's in the foods that we're eating. Okay. Again, this is pretty much the same as we looked at before. I don't think much is different here. In terms of supplements, along with the chronic kidney disease, you may be told to start taking some B complex vitamins. This is going to work together with the iron in your body to prevent anemia, which means that you don't have enough red blood cells, which your red blood cells' purpose of them is to carry the oxygen from your lungs to all parts of your body. So if you're anemic, that's when you might start having some breathing problems and shortness of breath. And we certainly need to resolve that. Also, iron is something that someone with CKD might be taking. They may be taking it either in the form of a pill, it may be injectionable iron, but again, is not a water-soluble vitamin, so it's important that you always check with your healthcare professional and do not take iron unless it's been prescribed. Vitamin C is one that a lot of people with chronic kidney disease are taking. It's going to help with a number of things, helps with wounds and bruise healing. It can prevent infections. Your doctor will tell you specifically how much to take. It's always a good idea to not guess. And just because you've heard about it, maybe on this webinar, that it's something that might be good for you, always check with your healthcare provider first to find out what an appropriate dose would be if you need it. Vitamin D is very important, maintains healthy bones, and there are different types of vitamin D, so it's important to find out which type of vitamin D is the type that you should be taking. Okay. So calcium, along with your vitamin D, is there, as we know, to help keep our bones healthy. We want to make sure, again, that you know what type of calcium is best, what amount of calcium. If your phosphorus levels are high, you might also have to be taking a phosphorus binder. So just make sure that you're working in coordination with your healthcare provider on the correct dose. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about phosphorus, potassium, sodium, and protein. As far as our phosphorus, it's found in a lot of foods and it has a lot of different functions. Our kidneys are responsible for removing the phosphorus, and in CKD, a lot of times the phosphorus can accumulate, which that can result in it pulling calcium from your bones, making our bones weaker, and then increasing your risk of osteoporosis. So it is important that you are aware of what your phosphorus levels are and know where to find phosphorus in our foods. Okay, so the safe levels of phosphorus are 2.5 to 4.5 for most labs. Again, it's always good to check with your doctor to make sure that that is in line with what they're thinking. Okay, so this list just talks, and it goes this way, if you can see my mouse. High phosphorus foods to limit or avoid first would be like beer and chocolate and colas, dairy products like milk and cheese, cream soups, ice cream, yogurt, puddings. Lower phosphorus things to enjoy. Sorry, let me jump back up to the drinks. Water, coffee, tea, apple juice, cranberry juice, things like that would be better. Jumping back down to the dairy products, rice milk, almond milk, cottage cheese, vegan cheese, sherbet, and popsicles are all lower phosphorus dairy foods that you could enjoy. As far as your proteins, things that are high would be oysters, organ meats, sardines, liver, beef liver, chicken liver, but chicken, turkey, fish, beef, eggs, pork, those are all better choices. But again, we talked about sometimes there are other nutrients that we might be watching for, so we have to keep those in mind. Most processed foods are going to be high in phosphorus as well. But things like apples and berries and grapes and carrot sticks, cucumber, rice cakes, these are all low phosphorus foods that are fine. And just keep in mind, you know, I know how difficult it can be sometimes when you're given a list of foods that you can't have. Just always know that there are lots and lots of foods that you can still have that are not on that list. So sometimes those lists of what to avoid can be kind of difficult to think outside of. So it's always a good idea. Make sure you find lists out there of the foods that are okay to have, so you don't get stuck with it feeling like you can't have anything. So as far as the phosphorus from our foods aren't absorbed quite the same way as added phosphorus is. Actually, so in a natural food, as opposed to a processed food, about 40 to 60% of the phosphorus is absorbed. But when it comes to processed foods and added phosphorus, it's actually absorbed a lot more. So 100% of the phosphorus that's added to our foods, our processed foods, our restaurant foods, that will be absorbed. So if you are prescribed phosphate binders, it's always important to take those every time that you eat, because the phosphorus really is in so many different foods. When you look at a label, you'll want to look at the ingredient list, not necessarily the top part of the label, but all the way at the bottom. And these are all the different examples of different names of different forms of phosphorus. But you'll notice the easy part is that they all have PHOS, phos, in it. So that is going to make it easy to find. And so that is going to be your clue that that is a form of phosphorus that you may need to limit. Okay. And okay, next let's talk about potassium. Again, it is also in a lot of foods. And let's see. Sorry, and it has a lot of different functions. People with CKD sometimes have high potassium, sometimes have low potassium. So this is part of your electrolyte balance that's super important, because when your potassium levels are off, you can end up with muscle cramps, you can have changes to your heart rate, it can cause muscle weakness. So if you have been told that you need to watch your potassium, there's going to be certain foods you'll want to avoid. And you know, foods that are low potassium are going to be better, but even foods that are higher in potassium, it doesn't mean that you have to completely avoid. It just means that you have to be aware of how much you're getting and be more careful. So a food that's considered high potassium would be one that has 200 milligrams or more of potassium in that serving. So that's kind of our gauge, or that's kind of our cutoff. Usually when the potassium is restricted, the restriction is about 2,400 milligrams per day. That might be what some of y'all have been told. And here we have a list of potassium that's in fruit, and obviously there's a long list. Also, I just wanted to mention that these webinars are recorded and they will be on the Cecilia Health website. Won't necessarily be there tomorrow, but if you want to be able to look back or listen to the webinar again, or just look back on the slides so that you can use these lists as a reference, just know that you are able to do that in the near future. So these are just lists of fruits that are higher in potassium. So again, they're going to have more than 200 milligrams of potassium per serving. And then over here, you have fruits that are lower in potassium. So these are the ones that you're able to have more of, and you just want to be a little bit more cautious with the higher potassium ones. Okay. And then here we have a list of all the vegetables that are high and low. It's the same thing, it's not listed up here, but these are your high potassium vegetables. And on the right side is your low potassium vegetables. So plenty of vegetables that are low, and fruits as well. So there's still a lot of foods to choose from. So potassiums in other foods, not fruits or vegetables, would be, beef, brand products are going to be higher, chocolate, dairy products, like we said, a lot of the nuts and seeds, salmon, unfortunately, peanut butter, and then some of the even bread products, you have to be kind of careful because they can vary a lot. So you just have to check your labels and be conscious of that. Okay, so let's talk about sodium next. And we know we kind of talked about this before. It's kind of repeating itself a little bit here. Again, it is a large part of the table salt. 2,300 milligrams is typical, especially for those that are in stages 1 and 2. 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day is usually where we want to limit. Again, fast foods, restaurant foods are very high in sodium. Ice cream is high in sodium. Frozen dinners like TV dinners and snacks can be very high. Again, even if it says it's low sodium, it's still likely to be pretty high in sodium. Canned and jarred foods, a lot of even frozen dinners, like I said, but frozen vegetables used to be packed or packaged with sodium, and they're not really anymore. So typically you're just getting the frozen vegetables without the added sodium, so that's always a good route to go if you don't like to do canned. And then, of course, cheeses. Most cheeses are processed, and meat and deli meats and things like that are all very high in sodium. So it's good to be able to know how to read the nutrition label. So if a label says sodium free, it's going to only have a very small amount of sodium per serving. So legally, they have to follow these definitions on a label. So if it's labeled very low sodium, it would be 35 milligrams or less per serving. Low sodium, it has to be 140 milligrams or less per serving. Reduced sodium, that means it has to be reduced from the original product by 25%. But again, some things are so high to begin with that might not be considered a low sodium food. And then the light or light in sodium, light would be indicative of a 50% reduction. Another rule of thumb that some people like to use is if it's listed in the first 5 ingredients, it's probably too high in sodium. Or another thing that you can do, and I believe there is a label on the next page, if you look at the percentages that are listed on the side, for sodium, you want to look for 5% or less, because that would be considered a low sodium food. If it's 20% or more, then that's going to be considered a high sodium food. So you always want to make sure you also check the serving size so you know what portion of that package is what they're what they're referring to. So I know it may be what your serving size is. It may not be. It could be half. It could be double. So always make sure you check the serving size as well. Okay. And let's see. These again are some of the same tips for reducing sodium. Just remember, always check your label because some things are a little surprising, like cottage cheese. Even it's a type of cheese, but it's actually kind of a condensed source of cheese, so it's often twice as high in sodium as regular cheeses, fast foods, restaurant foods. A lot of soups and salad dressings can be very high in sodium. So what some people like to do, like if you like canned soups and you just can't find one that is low enough in sodium, some people like to take it home and then dilute it down and add more water to it, or salt-free broth. You can add more vegetables to it, so you're basically diluting it, so per serving it's not going to be as high in sodium. Um, Also, a lot of commercially prepared condiments or marinades, or like your meats, that's like chicken, if you're buying it, it's already pre-marinated, that's typically going to have a lot of sodium in it. So if you can buy just the fresh meats and do the marinade with olive oil or lemon juice and some seasonings that you like, you're going to end up with a lot less sodium, and it's still going to taste great. Breakfast cereals can be very high in sodium. Breads can as well. Those can be a little tricky because some of them may only have like 80 milligrams of sodium per slice, when actually some can have 200 to 300 milligrams per slice. So that means in a sandwich, you could end up with 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium. So always check that label. That's why we have them, and they're there to kind of let us know exactly what's in our foods. So this is kind of, instead of this, try this with salts and seasonings. It's as opposed to like garlic salt and onion salt, meat tenderizers, going to be very high in sodium. Try using the garlic powders, the onion powders, pepper, lemon juice, vinegar, gives that acidic flavor, fresh garlic, fresh onion. Again, some of the same things here, low sodium sauces and salad dressings, or just make your own. And instead of cured meats like bacon, pork, also sauerkraut, pickles, those are very high in sodium. Olives are very high in sodium. Always best to have your fresh meats. Those are always going to be preferred. And then again, cold cuts, deli meats, pastrami, sausage, Spam, corned beef, hot dogs, all very high in sodium. So you're just going to have to really look for the low sodium, low salt deli meats. Okay. All right. So then let's talk about protein. Protein is made up of amino acids. It's very important for our body to function properly. It's used to build muscle. It's to heal our body. It helps us fight infection and just overall stay healthy. The amount of protein that we need can vary based on a person's body weight. There are some calculations that go by that use a person's body weight to calculate how much protein they need. Sometimes if someone is overweight, they may not have to use an adjusted body weight. Otherwise, that calculation can end up providing them too much protein. The protein that we eat for CKD can come from animals or plants. There's been a lot of talk about this. Sometimes patients will ask, well, which one is better? And I think a good recommendation is basically 50% from animal, 50% from plant, because there's benefits to both, so that we don't necessarily want to eliminate one or the other. And the studies have been a little bit inconclusive about the true benefit of plant sources over animal sources. So when you have kidney disease, your body's not able to remove all the waste products of the protein in your diet, which is why you may have to limit your protein. If you get a buildup of protein in your blood, then that can cause symptoms like nausea and weakness, loss of appetite. And so the more excess protein waste that's in your body, the harder your kidneys have to work, which is exactly the opposite of what we want when we're trying to slow the progression of kidney disease. We don't want them to wear out by overusing them and stressing them. Okay, and again, some studies are showing that plant-based foods can help slow the loss of kidney function. Okay, so in stages 1 and 2, the recommendations for protein is basically the same as someone without kidney disease, which is roughly speaking for an average size male, about 8 ounces per day or 56 grams of lean protein. For a female, it's going to be a little bit less, 6 to 7 ounces or more like 46 grams of lean protein a day. Okay. Just some different, just kind of go through some of the sources of protein. Your animal proteins like your chicken, your fish, your meat, your eggs, your dairy. Again, 2 to 3 ounces of meat or chicken or fish is going to be about the size of a deck of cards. A portion of a yogurt or milk is about half a cup. Or 1 slice of cheese. Portions of the beans would be about a half a cup. Nuts is a little bit less, more like a quarter of a cup. And then a portion of bread is easy, that's a single slice, or about a half of cup of rice or pasta. Okay. So again, I know we're going through these portions kind of fast, and some of this is what you're going to want to write down. So I would recommend a couple of things. You could go to the National Kidney Foundation and look for some information there. You want to make sure you're always looking at a good source of information, or you can check back once this webinar has been posted on the website and do a screenshot or something like that. So as we get into stages 3, 4, and 5, non-dialysis, your amount of protein that's recommended usually decreases. So it goes, it's going to be more like 0.25 to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. And again, you know, if someone is overweight, that's going to have to be adjusted. So for example, a 132-pound female is going to need approximately 33 to 36 grams of protein per day. So when you meet with a dietitian, that is who can do that calculation for you, so that all things can be taken into consideration as well. Okay. So once you start on dialysis, your protein needs increase because the dialysis will pull some of the protein from your body. And but we do need these proteins in order to keep our fluid balances right. In some cases, somebody may need to eat more protein to make up for what's lost during dialysis. So it's always good to know what stage of CKD you're in and work closely with your doctor and your dietitian. Okay. Here are some good resources, kidney.org, which is the National Kidney Foundation. They do have a good database of recipes if you like to cook. And also the Mayo Clinic has some really good recipes on there, and the American Kidney Fund, that website is really good. And they also have a section called the Kidney Kitchen, which is really good. I was just looking at that, and that has some really good information on it as well. Okay, so let's talk about fluids. So we mentioned before that anything that is liquid at room temperature would be considered fluid. So if you're in stage 1 and 2, you want to make sure that you're drinking enough water, and that's going to be about 64 ounces or 8-ounce glasses a day. It may vary a little bit based on the size of the person. We just want to keep our kidneys well hydrated, working well without putting it, we don't want to be putting extra stress. And then once you reach later stages of kidney disease, if you do, stages 3, 4, and 5, not on dialysis, you might have to limit some of the fluid that you can consume. You'll want to, of course, that'll come from your doctor. During kidney disease, you may experience some fluid retention. So there's too much fluid being built up in your body, which is why you may need to limit some of your fluid intake. So some of the signs that you may be retaining fluid, and it's very important to let your doctor know, is if you notice swelling in your feet or your ankles, if you start having shortness of breath or difficulty breathing when you're walking short distances, up a flight of stairs, even when you're just lying flat on your back. You may need to elevate yourself a little bit with some extra pillows just to help you breathe. So those are all signs that you may be retaining some fluid, and it's important to let your doctor know. Okay. Some other ways that does help slow down the progression of the kidney disease is quitting smoking if you're a smoker. It certainly can cause damage to the kidneys itself. It can raise your blood pressure. So certainly good motivation to quit smoking is to slow down the progression of your kidney disease. And then also limiting the amount of alcohol. So for women, that means no more than 1 drink per day. For men, that means no more than 2 drinks per day, because it is metabolized through your kidneys, your liver. So it's always good to cut back on alcohol. Okay, so we have reached the end of our slideshow. I know that was a lot of information to take in. So if you have questions that you would like me to try to answer tonight, feel free to go ahead and enter it into the chat, and we will try to get to as many as possible. If we're not able to get to your question, just know that you can always reach out to your health coach, your clinician, or write it down, make note of it, and discuss it with them on your next coaching call. So let me look here and see if we've got some questions. Okay, so in the chat box, should be to your right. Ashley, you might help me out with this from their view. Where they can enter their questions, and then I will keep my eye out for them. So for any of y'all that need to drop off, again, I certainly appreciate your time today, your attention, and thank you for being here with us today. Okay, so we'll give it just a minute because sometimes it takes a minute for the questions to show up here. Okay, I must have answered everybody's questions, or they all fell asleep, Ashley. Let's see.
There is one question: why are
Is
liquids
there?
spoken of as being room temperature? I think you mentioned anything at room temperature is liquid.
Yes. So something that, so basically if someone says, well, what constitutes a liquid? Because some, like watermelon or grapes might have, more fluid in it, but does that count as fluid? So basically just kind of the rule of thumb is if it's at room temperature and it's liquid, then it's going to count as a fluid. I hope that answers the question. Let's see. Kind of look here. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in.
Possibly I'm just able to
Yeah.
see them a little better. Here's another
Oh,
one.
yeah. Okay.
I'm
Okay, so I'm not
allergic to
seeing them.
fish, but I can
Okay.
eat shellfish. Is shellfish okay to eat?
So you're allergic to fish, but you can eat shellfish. Yes, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to include that shellfish into the CKD diet. Again, I see another question about liquids. Is like tap water or city water okay to drink? I guess because of some of the minerals that might be in it, yes. Because of the treatment plant that the water goes through, it has removed enough that it's certainly okay for someone with CKD to drink. Good question though. Okay. Um,
There's a
Go ahead.
question about coconut
Oh,
oil. Um,
okay.
is it okay to eat? It says coconut oil is okay. Always thought it
Hmm.
was too saturated of a fat to eat.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy or different opinions about that. I believe that from the information that I've seen, I think I did see coconut oil listed in there, and it is a saturated fat, but from what I have read and understood, I believe it would be fine.
How about apple cider vinegar? Is it good or bad?
Mm, I don't think that I've seen anything that says um, that you need to reduce the apple cider vinegar. It's something that's actually recommended as like if you're making your own salad dressings to use vinegar. So I think apple cider vinegar is great. I love to use it, and I don't see any reason why you would have to limit it. Let's see. So what fast foods can I eat? Um, Fast foods are tough because they do tend to be very high in sodium. They tend to be higher in the phosphorus, all the additives that we talked about, that long list that you want to watch out for. Um, you might want to look up some information, like if it's a chain that is, a popular chain that you could look up their nutrition information online. It would be good to take a look at that before you go so you have the nutrition facts in front of you. That might help. Um, a lot of restaurants have really good salads these days. Again, you do have to be careful with the salad dressings because those can be really high in sodium. Um, Same thing is true with even the salad kits that you buy now. Those dressings tend to be really high in sodium. But you can toss that salad dressing. That's what I tend to do. I like those salad kits because it's already all chopped up, and I guess I'm kind of lazy about that. So I like to buy those, but then sometimes the things that the little condiments and stuff aren't necessarily something I want. And the dressings can be really high in sodium as well. So you may have to use a reduced amount or maybe use something that you make at home, a dressing at home that's a little bit healthier for you. You can look for grilled foods. Most restaurants are pretty good about offering like grilled chicken instead of a battered or fried chicken, something that's broiled, and maybe ask for a side of fruit or vegetables or a salad instead of fries, things like that. So there are healthier options out there, but not as many. So it is kind of tough to eat out a lot with CKD for sure. Um, okay. Ashley, do you see anything else? I'm not.
Yes,
Okay.
I have low potassium. Should I try to eat
Mm-hmm.
more potassium?
So that's a good question. So you might, I would refer back to your healthcare provider because there are different things that can both raise the potassium and lower the potassium. Some medications can lower and or give you higher potassium. Um, like if you're on a diuretic like Lasix, that can decrease your potassium. So before you make changes, I would talk to your doctor first to see if there are any medications that you're taking that could be the cause of your potassium being high or low.
Okay. And someone asked about Jello.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a liquid?
I was
Break the
thinking
rule.
about that. I think Jello counts as the liquid. Does that sound right to you, Ashley? I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
it does.
it
Yeah.
does. It's like part of a clear
'Cause
liquid diet.
yeah, when
Yeah,
you're in the hospital on a clear liquid diet, they
yeah.
give you Jello, so you have to keep it in the fridge for it to be solid. So yeah, I think it counts as a liquid. So, okay,
All
anything
right.
else?
I think we're good
So,
on the questions. Thank you.
okay, sure. Go ahead.
Do you want to move forward on the slides?
Oh, sure, sure. Oh, did I skip two? Are we good?
There we
Okay, so if you are feeling like you have more questions, if you realize there's a lot more that you want to learn about, one thing to do is you can ask your health coach here at Cecilia Health. You can text them, you can email them, or you can talk to them on your next call with them. You can also sign up for text messages through Cecilia Health, and then also on our Facebook page, you can check us out and look for more information there.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lori, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. I hope everything got answered. And again, if you think of anything after the presentation, for sure, you can ask your health coach during your next call. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate your attendance, and we hope to see you at the next presentation. You can check back on the website and see if there's another one you want to sign up for. All right, everybody have a good evening. Bye-bye.